The text came at 2:17 a.m., glowing like a neon sign in the darkness of our bedroom. I'd been lying awake for hours, staring at the ceiling where Talia's side of the bed remained cold and untouched for the third night running. If you don't like it, divorce me. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. That was it. No explanation, no apology, no attempt at justification. Just those 7 words that managed to encapsulate the complete destruction of 12 years of marriage with the casual brutality of a weather report. I sat up in bed, my phone casting harsh shadows across the minimalist decor that Talia had insisted on when we'd bought this house in Millfield Harbor 5 years ago. Everything white and gray and soulless, like living inside a magazine spread. It's aspirational, Ronan, she'd said, using that tone she reserved for explaining obvious things to slow children. My name is Ronan Mercer, and until this week, I thought I knew my wife. Talia Vey, she'd kept her maiden name for brand recognition in her lifestyle consulting business, had been acting strange for months. Late nights at the office, weekend conferences that seemed to multiply like rabbits, and in sudden obsession with her appearance that involved daily gym sessions and a wardrobe overhaul that cost more than my car. But I'd been blind to the obvious until Monday morning when she walked out the door with an overnight bag and a man I'd seen hanging around her yoga studio. Evan Reddick, some hotshot real estate developer with perfect teeth and the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. She hadn't even tried to hide it. Tuesday brought Instagram posts from a beachside resort 2 hours north. Talia in a bikini I'd never seen, cocktails with little umbrellas, and always, always a masculine hand reaching into the frame. The captions were poetry and passive aggression. Living my truth, authentic connections, no apologies for happiness. Wednesday escalated to couple photos. Talia and Evan on a sunset beach, her head on his shoulder, both of them glowing with that particular smugness of people who think they're getting away with something. By Thursday, she wasn't even pretending anymore. A video of them at some fancy restaurant, Evan feeding her dessert while she giggled like a teenager. The location tag showed it was charged to our joint credit card. And now this text, delivered with all the ceremony of a parking ticket. I scrolled through her Instagram again, each post a fresh knife twist. The comments were a chorus of enablement from her circle of lifestyle blogger friends. You deserve happiness. Living for this glow. About time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to respond with something cutting, something that would slice through her smug certainty like a scalpel. Instead, I typed, okay. Just that. One word that would either infuriate her or leave her wondering what I meant. Both outcomes appealed to me. I got out of bed and walked to my home office, a small room that Talia had grudgingly allowed me to keep masculine with dark wood and actual books instead of decorative objects. From the filing cabinet, I pulled out a folder I'd hoped never to need. Contact information for divorce attorneys. At 3 a.m., I sent an email to Margaret Chen, a lawyer whose reputation for thoroughness was legendary in our small coastal town. The subject line read, "Urgent consultation needed." By the time the sun came up, I had an appointment for Friday afternoon and a plan that was crystallizing with each passing hour. Talia thought she held all the cards, but she'd made one critical error. She'd underestimated me. She'd always underestimated me. Friday afternoon arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made Millfield Harbor look like a postcard. I'd spent the morning with Margaret Chen, a sharp-eyed woman who listened to my story without judgment and laid out my options with surgical precision. Massachusetts is a no-fault state, she'd explained, but adultery can affect asset division, especially when marital funds were used to facilitate the affair. These credit card charges you've documented, they're going to be very helpful. By 2 p.m., I had divorce papers drawn up and ready to serve. By 3 p.m., I'd packed Talia's belongings with the methodical care of a professional mover. Not vindictively, I folded her clothes neatly, wrapped her decorative objects in tissue paper, and organized everything in matching suitcases that she'd bought for a European trip we'd planned but never taken. I was sitting in the living room, reading a book and waiting, when her car pulled into the driveway at 4:47 p.m. Through the window, I watched her emerge from her white BMW, practically glowing with vacation satisfaction. She'd gotten more sun, and her hair had been professionally styled. Even her posture radiated the confidence of a woman who believed she'd successfully manipulated the situation to her advantage. Evan wasn't with her, which was interesting. Apparently, he'd served his purpose as a catalyst, and now she was ready to return to the comfort of her established life, probably expecting me to be grateful for her attention. The front door opened, and Talia swept in like she owned the place, which legally she still did, half of it anyway. "Ronan," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone addressing a subordinate. "We need to talk." She looked fantastic, which irritated me more than it should have. The tan was real, her smile was radiant, and she moved with the loose-limbed confidence of someone who'd spent a week being worshipped by an eager lover. "Do we?" I asked, not looking up from my book. "Don't be childish," she said, dropping her purse on the coffee table with theatrical emphasis. "I know you're upset, but this is actually a good thing for both of us. I've had time to think, to really examine what I want from life, and I think we can work something out." I marked my page and set the book aside, finally meeting her eyes. "What kind of something?" "An arrangement," she said, settling onto the couch with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. "We're both adults, Ronan. We both have needs. I'm not asking you to pretend you're happy about Evan, but I think if you're honest with yourself, you'll admit that our marriage has been more of a business partnership than a romance for years." The audacity was breathtaking. She was actually proposing that I accept her affair as a new normal, that I smile and nod while she continued her relationship with her real estate developer on the side. "You want an open marriage," I said. "I want honesty," she corrected. "I want us to stop pretending that we're still the people who fell in love in college. We've grown apart, but that doesn't mean we have to destroy everything we've built together." She gestured around the room, encompassing the house, the life, the carefully curated existence she'd spent years constructing. "This works, Ronan. Our life works. We're good partners, we're financially stable, we have a beautiful home and a solid social position in the community. Why throw that away over something as basic as physical attraction?" I stood up slowly, walked to the dining room table, and picked up the manila envelope that had been waiting there since noon. "You're right," I said, returning to the living room. "We should be honest." I handed her the envelope. "What's this?" she asked, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. "Divorce papers," I said. "Your bags are packed and waiting by the door." For the first time since she'd walked into the house, Talia's composure cracked. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. "You're not serious," she whispered. "Completely serious," I said. "You wanted honesty? Here it is. I'm done. With the marriage, with the pretense, with you. You made your choice when you decided to publicly humiliate me for a week while charging your romantic getaway to our joint account. I'm simply responding to that choice." She tore open the envelope with shaking hands, scanning the legal documents with growing panic. "Ronan, you can't just... This is ridiculous. I was testing boundaries, exploring options. I never said I wanted a divorce." "You didn't have to say it," I replied. "You said it with every Instagram post, every credit card charge, every night you spent in another man's bed while texting me ultimatums at 2 a.m. "But I came back," she said, her voice rising. "I came back to you. That has to count for something." "It does," I agreed. "It counts as the final insult. You thought you could have your cake and eat it too, that I'd be sitting here grateful for whatever scraps of attention you decided to throw my way?" I pointed toward the front door, where her suitcases sat in a neat row. "You were wrong. The weekend that followed was a masterclass in how quickly gossip travels through a small New England town. By Saturday morning, our neighbor Mrs. Elkins had apparently witnessed enough of Friday's confrontation through her strategically positioned rose garden to provide the local coffee shop with a detailed play-by-play. Talia, meanwhile, had moved in with her best friend Renee, a self-proclaimed empowerment coach whose own marriage had imploded 2 years earlier under remarkably similar circumstances. Together, they'd launched what I could only describe as a social media campaign designed to reframe the narrative in Talia's favor. The Instagram post started Saturday night. Gone were the vacation photos with Evan. Instead, Talia had pivoted to inspirational quotes about toxic relationships and finding the courage to leave. The accompanying selfies showed her looking vulnerable but determined, often with strategic tears that caught the light just so. "Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who hurt us most," read one caption. "Learning to recognize emotional manipulation is the first step toward healing." The comments section was a Greek chorus of support from her lifestyle blogger network, each response more dramatic than the last. "You're so brave. I saw the signs but didn't want to say anything. He never deserved you." Sunday brought a video blog. Apparently Renee had convinced her to tell her truth to camera. Sitting in what I recognized as Renee's carefully curated living room, Talia delivered a 15-minute monologue about emotional abuse and controlling behavior that painted me as a manipulative monster who had systematically undermined her self-esteem for years. The performance was masterful. She never quite accused me of physical violence, but she implied it with strategic pauses and meaningful looks. She spoke about feeling trapped and suffocated, about how meeting Evan had shown her what it felt like to be truly valued by a partner. I know some people will judge me for how I handled things, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. But when you're in survival mode, when you are finally seeing clearly for the first time in years, sometimes you have to make hard choices to save yourself. The video went viral within her circles, shared and reshared by women who saw it as a cautionary tale about the hidden dangers of seemingly stable marriages. By Monday morning, it had over 10,000 views and hundreds of comments expressing solidarity with her journey. The real-world consequences hit me at work. I'm a corporate strategist for a mid-sized consulting firm, the kind of job that requires client trust and professional credibility. When whispers about your personal life start affecting your professional reputation, it becomes a problem very quickly. My boss, Janet Morrison, called me into her office Monday afternoon with the kind of expression usually reserved for delivering terminal diagnoses. "Ronan," she said, gesturing for me to close the door, "we need to talk about the situation at home." "What situation?" I asked, though I already knew. "Several clients have mentioned seeing some concerning content online," she said carefully. "Content that suggests you might be dealing with some personal issues that could affect your work." I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. Talia's social media campaign wasn't just about public vindication, it was about destroying my ability to rebuild my life without her. "Janet, whatever you've seen or heard, I can assure you—" "I'm not making accusations," she interrupted. "I'm simply saying that perception matters in our business. If clients start to question your stability or judgment, it affects all of us." She handed me a business card for the company's Employee Assistance Program. "Take some time," she said. "Get whatever help you need. We'll hold your position for 2 weeks, but after that, we'll need to reassess." I walked out of that office understanding exactly what Talia had done. She'd weaponized social media to create a narrative where I was the villain and she was the victim, knowing that in today's climate, the accusation alone would be enough to damage my reputation irreparably. But she'd made one critical error in her strategy. She'd assumed I would take it quietly. That evening, I called my old college roommate, Marty Sullivan, who'd parlayed a criminal justice degree into a successful private investigation business. If Talia wanted to play dirty, I was going to need professional help. "Jesus, Ronan," Marty said after I'd explained the situation. "She really went nuclear, didn't she? The question is, what can I do about it?" "Well," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, "that depends on how much you want to know about what she and her boyfriend have really been up to." Marty Sullivan hadn't changed much since college. Still built like a linebacker, still possessed of the kind of cynical humor that comes from years of catching people in lies for a living. When he showed up at my house Tuesday evening with a laptop bag and a thermos of coffee, he looked like a man who was about to enjoy his work. "First rule of investigations," he said, settling into my kitchen table. "People who are cheating are usually cheating in more ways than one. Your wife's boyfriend, Evan Reddick. Tell me what you know about him." I gave him the basics. Real estate developer, owned several properties around town, drove a black Tesla, and had the kind of aggressive confidence that suggested he was used to getting his way. "Evan Reddick," Marty repeated, typing into his laptop. "Yeah, I know that name. He's been making waves in the development community, buying up waterfront properties and flipping them for luxury condos." His fingers flew across the keyboard for several minutes before he looked up with the expression of a hunter who just spotted fresh tracks. "Interesting," he said. "Your boy Evan has been very busy lately. 3 property purchases in the last 6 months, all paid for with cash, all in areas that just happen to be scheduled for rezoning next year. Is that illegal? Not necessarily, but it suggests he has access to inside information. The kind of information that could make someone very rich if they knew which properties to buy before the zoning changes were announced." Marty turned the laptop screen toward me, showing a complex web of property records, permit applications, and city council meeting minutes. "Here's where it gets interesting," he continued. 2 of those properties were purchased through shell companies, which is perfectly legal, but definitely shady. And all 3 purchases happened right after closed city council sessions where rezoning was discussed. So he's corrupt. Probably, but that's not what's going to help you right now. Marty pulled up another screen. "This is." The image showed Evan's Tesla parked outside a restaurant I didn't recognize, timestamp showing last Thursday evening. Through the window, I could see Evan at a table with 2 other men, documents spread between them. "That's Mason Webb and Tony Castellano," Marty explained. "Webb's a city councilman. Castellano works for the Planning Commission. This photo was taken the night before the city announced they were fast-tracking the waterfront rezoning project." I stared at the image, understanding dawning slowly. "He's bribing city officials." "Can't prove that from one photo," Marty said, "but it's definitely worth investigating. especially since your wife has been posting about expensive dinners and weekend trips that seem to coincide with Evan's business dealings. He clicked through a series of screenshots from Talia's Instagram, cross-referenced with dates and locations. "Look at this," he said. "Last month she posted about a romantic weekend in Boston. Same weekend that Evan had meetings with investors about his waterfront project. 2 weeks ago she's at some fancy restaurant in Providence. Evan was there meeting with a contractor who just happened to win the bid for his latest development. You think she knows?" "I think she's been along for the ride and probably has no idea how deep this goes," Marty said, "which gives us leverage." He closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. "Here's what we're going to do," he said. "First, I'm going to dig deeper into Evan's business dealings. If he's as dirty as I think he is, we'll have enough to bury him. Second, we're going to document everything, every dinner, every trip, every expense that your wife charged to your joint accounts while she was helping him celebrate his illegal profits. And then? Then we're going to have a conversation with Mrs. Talia Vey about the consequences of playing games with people who know how to play them better." Wednesday morning brought a development that made Marty's investigation even more urgent. I arrived at work to find an email from HR requesting a meeting to discuss concerns that have been raised about your professional conduct. The meeting was a nightmare of corporate doublespeak and careful non-accusations. Apparently, someone had contacted my employer with credible information, suggesting that I might be emotionally unstable and potentially dangerous to female colleagues. "We're not saying we believe these allegations," the HR director assured me, "but we have a responsibility to investigate any claims that could affect workplace safety." I was placed on administrative leave pending a full review. Walking to my car in the company parking lot, I called Marty with shaking hands. "They're trying to destroy my career," I said. "Yeah, well," Marty replied, "two can play that game. Meet me at Evan's office building at 6 p.m. I want to show you something." That evening, Marty and I sat in his car across from Reddick Development's downtown office, watching Evan through the large windows as he worked late. At exactly 6:15, a city official I recognized from local news arrived for what was obviously a clandestine meeting. "Councilman Webb," Marty said, raising a camera with a telephoto lens. "Right on schedule." For the next hour, we documented what appeared to be a very friendly exchange of documents and what looked suspiciously like an envelope full of cash changing hands. "Got him," Marty said, reviewing the photos on his camera. "This is enough to end his career and probably send him to prison." "What about Talia? What about her?" Marty grinned. She just spent a week publicly documenting her relationship with a man who's about to be arrested for municipal corruption. How's that going to look to her lifestyle blogger friends? For the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. Thursday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Something had happened overnight. Something big enough to send Talia's support network into complete meltdown. The first call I returned was to Marty, who answered on the first ring with barely contained excitement. "Turn on Channel 7, he said. "You're going to love this." I grabbed the remote and switched to the local news, where a perfectly coiffed reporter was standing outside the Millfield Harbor City Hall with the kind of expression that suggested careers were about to end. Federal investigation into municipal corruption has resulted in the arrest of City Councilman Mason Webb and Planning Commission member Tony Castellano. Sources close to the investigation suggest that both men were receiving payments in exchange for inside information about upcoming zoning changes. The camera cut to footage of Webb being led away in handcuffs, followed by a shot of Evan's office building with FBI agents carrying boxes of evidence. Real estate developer Evan Reddick is also being questioned in connection with the investigation, the reporter continued. Reddick, whose company has purchased several waterfront properties in recent months, has not been charged, but is considered a person of interest in the ongoing probe. I muted the television and called Marty back. "Please tell me you had something to do with this." "Let's just say that sometimes concerned citizens feel compelled to share information with the appropriate authorities," he said. "Those photos we took? They were very helpful in establishing probable cause for search warrants." "What about Talia?" "Check her Instagram." I hung up and opened the app, scrolling to Talia's profile with growing amazement. The last week's worth of posts, all the romantic dinners, the luxury hotel stays, the champagne toasts with Evan, now looked like evidence in a federal corruption case. But more than that, they looked like the social media trail of a woman who'd been living off the proceeds of criminal activity. The comments section was a fascinating study in how quickly public opinion can shift. The same people who'd been praising her courage and authenticity just days earlier were now asking pointed questions about how she'd afforded such an expensive lifestyle on her consultant's salary. "A girl, those restaurants cost like $300 a plate," wrote one former supporter. "How does a lifestyle coach afford that?" Wait, isn't this the guy who just got arrested? Asked another. She was dating a criminal and didn't know? Sure, Jan. By noon, the story had been picked up by the regional news outlets, complete with screenshots from Talia's social media accounts. The narrative that had been so carefully constructed to portray her as a victim of an abusive marriage was crumbling under the weight of her association with a man who was now facing federal charges. My phone rang at 1:30 p.m. Talia's number. "Ronan," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We need to talk." "Do we?" "This is insane. I had nothing to do with whatever Evan was involved in. I'm as shocked as anyone." "Are you?" "Of course I am. You think I would have gotten involved with him if I'd known he was a criminal?" It was a fair point, actually. Talia was many things: manipulative, self-centered, ruthlessly ambitious. But she wasn't stupid. She would never have risked her carefully cultivated image by knowingly associating with someone involved in municipal corruption, which made her current situation even more delicious. "The problem, Talia," I said, "is that it doesn't matter what you knew or didn't know. What matters is how it looks." "How it looks?" "You spent a week publicly flaunting your relationship with a man who's now under federal investigation. You charged expensive dinners and luxury hotel stays to our joint credit card while he was apparently celebrating his criminal profits. Your social media accounts are going to be evidence in a corruption trial." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly a minute. "I need you to help me," she finally said, her voice small and vulnerable in a way I hadn't heard since college. "Help you how?" "Tell people that we were having problems, that I was confused and made a mistake. Tell them that Evan took advantage of my emotional state. You want me to lie for you. I want you to help me salvage something from this disaster." I looked around the house that we'd shared for 5 years, at the carefully curated life that she'd built, and then casually destroyed in pursuit of something more exciting. "No," I said. "Ronan, please. You made your choice, Talia. You chose to humiliate me publicly, to destroy my reputation, to try to ruin my career. You chose to paint me as an abuser while you were living off the proceeds of criminal activity. You made your bed with a federal investigation target." I paused, savoring the moment. "Now you get to lie in it." I hung up and immediately called my lawyer to discuss how Talia's association with Evan's criminal enterprise might affect our divorce proceedings. It was going to be a very good conversation. Friday brought news that Evan Reddick had been formally charged with bribery, conspiracy, and wire fraud. The FBI had apparently found enough evidence in his seized computers and financial records to build a case that could send him to federal prison for 20 years. More importantly, for my purposes, they'd also found detailed records of every expensive dinner, every luxury hotel stay, and every romantic getaway that he'd shared with Talia over the past 6 months. What she'd thought were spontaneous romantic gestures were actually calculated attempts to launder his criminal profits through lavish entertainment expenses. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about the corruption scandal, complete with a sidebar about the social media evidence that had helped expose the conspiracy. Talia's Instagram posts were featured prominently, transformed overnight from lifestyle inspiration to criminal evidence. By Saturday morning, her follower count had dropped by 60%, and her lifestyle consulting business had lost every major client. But Talia, to her credit, wasn't going down without a fight. Saturday afternoon brought a new video blog, this one filmed in what appeared to be a lawyer's office. Gone was the vulnerable victim persona. Instead, Talia had pivoted to righteous indignation. "I want to be absolutely clear about something," she said, looking directly into the camera with steely determination. "I am not responsible for Evan Reddick's criminal activities. I was deceived and manipulated by a man who took advantage of my emotional vulnerability during a difficult time in my marriage. She was good, I had to admit. The performance was pitch perfect. Wounded but strong, betrayed but resilient. My estranged husband has chosen to use this situation to further damage my reputation and destroy my business," she continued. "Instead of supporting me through this difficult time, he's actively working to ensure that I'm punished for being the victim of someone else's crimes." The comments section was more divided this time. While she'd lost most of her casual followers, her core supporters were rallying around her new narrative of double victimization. "Stay strong, Queen. He's showing his true colors now. This is what emotional abuse looks like." But there was also a growing chorus of skepticism. "How do you not know your boyfriend is a criminal? Those receipts don't lie. Maybe take some responsibility for your choices." Sunday evening, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Talia standing on my front porch, but she wasn't alone. Renee was with her, along with 2 other women I recognized from Talia's lifestyle blogger network. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. "Ronan," Talia said, her voice carrying the kind of forced calm that suggested barely contained desperation. "We need to have a serious conversation about how we're going to handle this situation." "We?" I asked. "This affects both of us," she said. "The media attention, the investigation, it's damaging to both our reputations. We need to present a united front." A united front," I repeated. "We tell the truth," she said. "That our marriage was in trouble, that I made some poor choices during a difficult emotional period, but that we're committed to working through this together." Renee stepped forward, apparently deciding that Talia needed backup. "She's trying to do the right thing here, Ronan," she said. "The least you could do is support your wife when she's going through the worst crisis of her life." I looked at the four women standing on my porch. Talia with her desperate hope, Renee with her aggressive advocacy, and the two bloggers who were probably already composing social media posts about this confrontation. "No," I said. "No?" Talia's voice cracked slightly. "No united front, no reconciliation, no public support. You made your choices, Talia. You chose to destroy our marriage publicly, to damage my career, to humiliate me in front of our entire community. You chose to do all of that while you were unknowingly dating a criminal." I stepped back and began to close the door. "You wanted authenticity? You wanted to live your truth? Congratulations. This is what it looks like." "Ronan, wait." But I'd already closed the door and turned the lock bolt. Through the window, I watched them stand on my porch for several more minutes, Renee gesticulating angrily while Talia stared at the door like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Finally, they left. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a text from Marty. "Turn on Channel 7. You're going to want to see this." The evening news was running a follow-up story about the corruption investigation, and this time they'd done their homework. The reporter had traced the timeline of Evan's criminal activities and cross-referenced them with Talia's social media posts, creating a damning portrait of a relationship that had been built on criminal profits. While Vey claims she was unaware of Reddick's illegal activities, the reporter said, financial records show that she was the direct beneficiary of thousands of dollars in entertainment and travel expenses that are now believed to have been funded by bribery payments. The story included an interview with a former client of Talia's lifestyle consulting business, a woman who expressed feeling deceived and betrayed by someone she'd trusted for advice about authentic living. "How can you teach people about authenticity when you're living a lie?" the woman asked. It was a question that was going to follow Talia for the rest of her life. Monday morning brought the final piece of news I'd been waiting for. My employer had completed their investigation and determined that the allegations against me were unsubstantiated and likely malicious. I was reinstated immediately with full back pay and a formal apology. The same day, Talia's remaining business clients terminated their contracts, citing reputational concerns and questions about professional judgment. Her lifestyle consulting business, which she'd spent 3 years building, was effectively over. But the real satisfaction came Tuesday afternoon when Marty called with an update that exceeded even my wildest expectations. "You're not going to believe this," he said, barely able to contain his laughter. "The FBI wants to interview your wife as part of their investigation." "What?" Apparently, some of those romantic dinners she documented so thoroughly on Instagram were actually business meetings where Evan was discussing his development projects with potential investors. She was there, she was photographing everything, and now they want to know what she heard. The irony was exquisite. Talia's compulsive need to document her life on social media had turned her into an inadvertent witness to federal crimes. "She's not in legal trouble," Marty continued, "but she's definitely going to be called to testify when this goes to trial. Her Instagram account is now evidence in a federal corruption case." Wednesday brought Talia's final attempt at damage control, a lengthy blog post titled, "My Truth, How I Survived Deception and Betrayal." It was a masterpiece of revisionist history that painted her as the innocent victim of not one, but two manipulative men. Evan, who had deceived her about his criminal activities, and me, who had weaponized her trauma to destroy her reputation. The post went viral, but not in the way she'd intended. Social media users dissected every claim, cross-referenced every timeline, and fact-checked every assertion. The consensus was brutal. Talia had made a series of terrible choices and was now trying to escape responsibility by claiming victimhood. "Actions have consequences," read one widely shared comment. "You can't publicly humiliate your husband, date a criminal, and then claim you're the victim when it all falls apart." Thursday evening, exactly 2 weeks after she'd walked out of our house with her overnight bag and her smug confidence, Talia called me one final time. "I'm leaving town," she said without preamble. "Where are you going?" "My sister's place in California. I need to get away from all this, start over somewhere fresh." That's probably wise. Ronan, she said, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been genuine remorse. I know you probably won't believe this, but I never meant for things to get this bad. I believe you, I said, and I did. You thought you could have it all. The excitement of an affair, the security of a marriage, and the sympathy of being a victim. You just didn't think through the consequences. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix what you broke. Will you ever be able to forgive me? I considered the question seriously. 2 weeks ago, I might have said no, that the betrayal was too complete, the humiliation too public, the damage too extensive. But sitting in my house now, since she'd signed the divorce papers that morning, I found that my anger had burned itself out, leaving behind something that felt surprisingly like pity. Someday, I said, but not today. Goodbye, Ronan. Goodbye, Talia. I hung up and walked to the window, looking out at the harbor where the evening light was turning the water gold. Somewhere across town, Talia was packing up the remnants of the life she'd destroyed in pursuit of something more exciting. Somewhere in federal custody, Evan Reddick was probably regretting the day he'd decided to corrupt city officials and seduce married women. And here in my living room, I was finally free to figure out what came next. My phone buzzed with a text from Marty. Beer to celebrate your freedom? I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. It was time to start the next chapter of my life. 2 weeks ago, Talia had vanished for a week with a man she'd never tried to hide, telling me that if I didn't like it, I could divorce her. She'd returned tanned, smug, and smiling, expecting me to accept her terms. Instead, I'd handed her divorce papers and watched her turn white with shock. Now she was gone, her reputation in ruins, her business destroyed, her criminal boyfriend facing federal prison, and her social media accounts preserved forever as evidence in a corruption trial. She'd wanted to live authentically, to follow her truth wherever it led. She'd gotten exactly what she asked for.